She knew that Brian was toxic. She knew she had to get him out of her life. She just couldn't keep those demons away.
Don't tell me how to mourn. That's the message from Hayden Panettiere's estranged mother, who lashed out in her first sit-down interview since her daughter's death. As Stephen Fabian reports, she says despite her daughter's incredible talent, she couldn't overcome her demons.
Hayden Panettiere's heartbroken mom is speaking out about the moment she was told her daughter was dead.
I was numb. I was just numb. I just couldn't feel anything. I still am not grasping this as real.
In her interview with GMA, Lesley Vogel became so distraught she had to take a break.
I need a minute, guys.
She also says she has questions about the account Hayden's boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, has given cops about her death from a suspected drug overdose.
On August 21st, 1989, a girl was born in a small town on the Hudson River who would grow up to play a cheerleader who could not be killed. She spent the next 2 decades of her life proving that the real world doesn't work that way. On August 17, 2026, 5 days before what would have been her 37th birthday, Hayden Panettiere was found unresponsive inside a rented apartment in Greenville, South Carolina. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The man beside her when it happened was the same man a Los Angeles judge had, just 3 days earlier, refused to let walk away clean from 2 felony convictions for hurting her. Tonight, we are not going to sensationalize a woman's death for clicks. We're going to lay out exactly what has been confirmed, exactly what is still just an allegation, and exactly what the record shows about the years that led to this apartment, this Sunday afternoon, and this 911 call. Because somewhere between Heroes and Greenville, the warnings were all there. Somebody just has to say it out loud. I'm host name. This is True Crime Nabuma. And this is the story of Hayden Panettiere. Theme sting. Title card. Before any of this, there was a kid from Palisades, New York, doing soap opera work at 4 years old because her mother, Lesley Vogel, had been a soap actress herself and knew the business from the inside. By the time Hayden Panettiere was a teenager, she wasn't a child actor anymore. She was a franchise. Remember the Titans put her in front of a national audience at 10. Ice Princess and Raising Helen kept her there. And then, in 2006, she became Claire Bennett on NBC's Heroes, the cheerleader with the power of rapid healing, the character behind the show's tagline, "Save the cheerleader, save the world." She was 17 years old and carrying one of the biggest genre shows on television. What almost nobody watching at home knew. While she was playing a girl who couldn't be hurt, she was, by her own later account, already struggling with an eating disorder, with anxiety, and eventually with substance use that she would not speak publicly about for years. She went on to headline ABC's musical drama Nashville as Juliet Barnes, a role that, in a detail that still unsettles people who go back and rewatch it, mirrored her real addiction and her real postpartum struggles almost in real time. Because, as she said in interviews later in her life, the writers were pulling storylines directly from what was happening to her, sometimes handing her scripts so close to the shoot date that she had no ability to push back on the parallels. In 2018, she gave birth to her daughter, Kaya, with her then-fiancé, world heavyweight boxing champion Vladimir Klitschko. She and Klitschko separated not long after. Klitschko has raised Kaya primarily in Europe in the years since. That same year, 2018, Hayden Panettiere entered a relationship that would define the rest of her public life, for reasons that had nothing to do with acting. His name was Brian Hickerson. We want to be precise here, because this is the part of Hayden Panettiere's story that tabloids have covered for 6 years, and precision matters when we're talking about a documented criminal history. This is not, he said, she said. This is a matter of public record. Panettiere and Hickerson, a real estate agent and aspiring actor from Greenville, South Carolina, began dating in 2018, shortly after her split from Klitschko. Almost immediately, according to multiple police reports filed over the following 2 years, the relationship became violent. In October 2019, police in Wyoming were called to a residence after what officers described as a bloody altercation involving Panettiere, Hickerson, and Hickerson's father. Panettiere reportedly opened the door in a frantic state. Hickerson's father was injured. Panettiere told officers she had been drinking. Hickerson's father told police no assault had occurred and blamed the incident on alcohol. Friends told entertainment outlets at the time they were worried about what they called an unhealthy situation. For months later, on Valentine's Day 2020, Teton County, Wyoming sheriff's deputies were called to a private residence around 2:30 in the morning. According to the police report, Panettiere called 911 after Hickerson allegedly punched her in the face. She locked him out of the house. Deputies found him in the driveway and arrested him for domestic battery and interference with a police officer. The responding officer noted visible injuries on Panettiere's face. Hickerson told police that Panettiere had accused him of, in his words, beating her up. Panettiere obtained a restraining order against him that July. Then, that same month, prosecutors in Los Angeles filed an 8-count criminal complaint against Hickerson covering a string of incidents alleged to have occurred between May 2019 and January 2020 for felony counts of injuring a spouse, cohabitant, girlfriend, or child's parent, 1 misdemeanor battery count, 2 felony counts of assault with a deadly weapon. The complaint specifically cited a garage floor and a set of stairs as the weapons used, and 1 felony count of attempting to dissuade a witness from prosecuting a crime. He pleaded not guilty to all 8 counts in July 2020. In April 2021, Hickerson changed his plea. He pleaded no contest, meaning he did not admit guilt but accepted the conviction as though he had, to 2 of the felony counts of injuring a spouse or girlfriend. The remaining 6 counts, including the assault with a deadly weapon and witness intimidation charges, were dismissed as part of the deal. He was sentenced to 45 days in county jail, of which he ultimately served 12. He was placed on 4 years of formal probation, ordered to complete 52 weeks of domestic violence classes, pay $500 in restitution, and comply with a 5-year protective order barring contact with Panettiere. He reported to Men's Central Jail in Los Angeles in May 2021 and was released within weeks. And then, and this is the part that a lot of casual observers of this story don't know, they got back together. By 2022, with the protective order technically still active in some form, Panettiere confirmed to the New York Times that she and Hickerson had reconciled. There are feelings there, yes, she said when asked directly. She said he knew he deserved what happened to him. She said they were both sober. For the next several years, the relationship was reported as on again, off again. Friends and family, most vocally her mother, Lesley Vogel, continued to express alarm. And Hickerson, for his part, kept trying to get the 2021 convictions off his record. In the years before her death, Hayden Panettiere did something a lot of survivors never get the chance, or the platform, to do. She wrote about it herself, on her own terms, in a memoir titled This Is Me, A Reckoning. In it, and in the interviews that followed its release, she spoke openly for the first time about the extent of what she said happened in that relationship. The violent outbursts, the 3 arrests, the jail sentence. She also spoke, separately, about her childhood, describing a relationship with her mother that she said had been, in her words, almost strictly professional even when she was a minor, telling one podcast host that in the hero's years she had asked her mother directly to just be her mom instead of her manager. That detail matters for what comes later in this story, because Lesley Vogel is about to become one of the central voices in the days after her daughter's death, and the 2 of them had, by multiple accounts, been estranged again at the time Hayden died, a rift her mother has since said was partly caused by her own attempts to get Hickerson out of her daughter's life. In 2020, back when the first restraining order was filed, Panettiere released a statement through her then-attorney that has taken on a different weight now, in hindsight. She said she was coming forward with the truth about what had happened to her, in the hope that her story would help other people in abusive relationships get the help they needed. She said she was prepared to do her part to make sure, in her words, that man never hurt anyone again. She was talking about a legal process. 6 years later, we're going to talk about whether that process actually protected her. Here is where the timeline tightens, and where a lot of the public's questions start. On August 13, 2026, a Thursday, Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Olivia Rosales held a hearing on a motion filed by Brian Hickerson's attorneys. Hickerson was asking the court to do 2 things: reduce his 2021 felony convictions to misdemeanors and expunge them from his record entirely, arguing he had completed the terms of his probation. It was not his first attempt. He'd made a nearly identical request in July of the previous year and been denied. This time, prosecutors again opposed the motion. Judge Rosales denied both requests. The felony conviction stood. The record stayed exactly as it was. That ruling came down 3 days before Hayden Panettiere died. We want to be careful here, because it is very easy in true crime coverage to turn a coincidence of timing into a motive, and we are not going to do that without evidence to support it. What we can tell you is what's confirmed. The timing is now part of the public record. It has been reported by essentially every major outlet covering this story, and it is one of the first things people search for when they type Hayden Panettiere's name into Google. We'll get to exactly what people are searching a little later in this episode. What we don't know, and what has not been reported by anyone with direct knowledge of Hickerson's state of mind that week, is how he reacted to the ruling, what his mood was over that weekend, or whether it had any bearing at all on what happened 3 days later. Speculation on that point, without sourcing, is exactly the kind of thing this channel does not do. So we're laying out the timeline and letting you sit with it. According to the Greenville Police Department's redacted incident report, and according to the Greenville County Coroner's Office, here is what is confirmed to have happened that Sunday. Hayden Panettiere had been staying temporarily at an apartment complex called Judson Mill Lofts in Greenville, Brian Hickerson's hometown. Just before 2 p.m., a 911 call came in reporting an unresponsive female in cardiac arrest inside the residence. Dispatch audio obtained by TMZ captured responders being sent to the location to perform CPR on what was described as a possible overdose. Greenville police officers arrived to assist EMS and, according to the incident report, found multiple first responders already performing life-saving measures. The responding officer spoke with 2 men at the scene, Brian Hickerson and his brother, Zach Hickerson. Paramedics attempted advanced cardiac life support, CPR combined with medication, breathing tubes, and heart rhythm monitoring. It did not work. Hayden Panettiere was pronounced dead at the scene. She was 36 years old. The Greenville County Coroner's Office said the following day that Panettiere had reportedly been in cardiac arrest when an acquaintance made the 911 call. Police stated publicly, in the days that followed, that there were no initial signs of foul play, and that the circumstances did not appear suspicious. An autopsy was performed. The coroner's office has since said the autopsy found no trauma that contributed to her death. Toxicology results, the tests that would determine what, if any, substances were in her system, were still pending as of this recording. So that's what's confirmed. Now here's what's being reported, attributed, and still unverified. And we're going to be very clear about the difference every step of the way. One detail has dominated the tabloid coverage of this case more than almost any other: Narcan. Narcan, naloxone, is an emergency medication used to reverse opioid overdoses. It's typically administered as a nasal spray. If someone is overdosing on opioids and Narcan is given quickly enough, it can restore breathing within minutes. Multiple outlets, citing law enforcement sources, have reported that Narcan was found at the scene. What remains genuinely unclear, and what has not been definitively established in any report we can verify, is who administered it, when, and whether it was given before or after emergency responders arrived. Some reporting has suggested it's unclear whether Hayden treated herself or whether someone else administered it to her. Other secondhand accounts, relayed through entertainment outlets citing unnamed sources close to the Hickerson family, have described a version of events in which Zach Hickerson arrived at the apartment after being unable to reach his brother and Hayden by phone, found Brian Hickerson having just woken up, and was told that Brian had administered the Narcan to her. We want to flag something important about that account. It comes from secondhand, unnamed sourcing relayed through celebrity gossip outlets, not from a direct statement by Brian Hickerson himself, not from the police report as officially released, and not from the coroner's office. It has not been confirmed by investigators. We are including it here because it is widely circulating and because you, watching this, have almost certainly seen it, but we are not treating it as established fact, and neither should you. What is separately confirmed, through ABC News' review of the police report, Hickerson was in a bedroom of the apartment, and it was his brother, Zach, who found Panettiere unresponsive in the living room. That's a meaningfully different detail than some of the earlier tabloid framing suggested. And it's exactly why this channel waits for documents, not just clips. Let's talk about where the actual investigation stands, because this is the part that matters most and gets buried under speculation the fastest. As of this recording, Brian Hickerson has not been arrested in connection with Hayden Panettiere's death. He has not been charged with any crime related to her death. He has not been publicly named a person of interest or a suspect by the Greenville Police Department or the Greenville County Coroner's Office. Police have stated there were no initial signs of foul play. The coroner's office has stated the autopsy found no trauma contributing to her death. The Drug Enforcement Administration has been reported to be involved in the case, alongside local authorities and the coroner's office, as toxicology results remain pending. That detail, DEA involvement, has fueled a lot of online speculation, but it is worth noting that DEA involvement in a case involving a possible overdose is not unusual and is not, by itself, an indication that anyone is facing charges. It typically reflects an interest in tracing the source of any controlled substances involved, not necessarily an allegation against a specific person. Separately, and reportedly unrelated to the death investigation, Greenville officers were called to conduct a welfare check at the Hickerson family home several days after Hayden's death. Local officials described it as unconnected to the ongoing case. Hickerson's attorney, Sloan Ellis, released a statement through his office days after Panettiere's death. In it, he said Hayden's death remains under investigation, that it's important to allow that investigation to proceed, and that, as had been publicly reported, police confirmed there were no signs of foul play. He said that out of respect for Hayden's loved ones and the ongoing investigation, there would be no further comment at that time. That is the entirety of Brian Hickerson's camp's public response as of this recording. He has not given an interview. He has not released a personal statement in his own words. So when you see headlines implying an arrest is imminent or that charges have been filed, as of the making of this video, that has not happened. We will update you the moment that changes. Now we get to the most emotionally charged reporting of the last several days. And we want to slow down here, because this is exactly the kind of material that gets flattened into a headline without context. And we're not going to do that to a grieving mother or to a man who has not been charged with anything. On Sunday, August 23rd, the New York Times published an interview with Hayden's estranged mother, Lesley Vogel. In it, Vogel made a series of allegations about Brian Hickerson's conduct toward her daughter in the period before her death. According to Vogel, she traveled to Los Angeles roughly a year before Hayden's death to help her daughter through what she described as a serious health crisis, an unexplained pins and needles sensation in her lower body that made it difficult for Hayden to walk normally. Hayden reportedly wondered whether it might be connected to old injuries from her years as a child actor. Vogel says the two of them sought out doctors, tried massage, tried acupuncture, looking for relief. It was during that period, Vogel told The Times, that she learned Hickerson had allegedly pawned some of her daughter's belongings, including, specifically, a vintage guitar, and that other items were being kept in a storage unit under Hickerson's name, without Hayden's apparent knowledge. Vogel said her daughter was shocked to discover this. A separate, unnamed source told The Times they could confirm Hickerson had sold off some of Panettiere's possessions. Vogel described her daughter, in that period, in stark terms, depleted, she said, financially, emotionally, and physically. Court records reviewed by TMZ show Hickerson filed for bankruptcy in 2022, listing approximately $25,700 in assets against roughly $60,000 in debt. Vogel also told The Times that her efforts to push Hickerson out of her daughter's finances and personal life contributed to a renewed falling out between her and Hayden. The same estrangement, by some accounts, that was still unresolved at the time Hayden died. Separately, sources with knowledge of Hayden's memoir book tour told The Times that a venue hosting a stop on the tour had, at some point, barred Hickerson from attending. We want to say this plainly. Everything in this segment is an allegation from Hayden's mother and from unnamed sources, relayed through one newspaper's reporting. Brian Hickerson has not responded publicly to any of these specific claims. He has not been charged with theft, fraud, or any financial crime related to Hayden Panettiere. These are claims. We are reporting that the claims were made, by whom, and through which outlet, not confirming that they are true. That distinction is the entire difference between journalism and character assassination, and on this channel, we stay on the journalism side of that line. While the investigation continues, the people who actually knew Hayden Panettiere have been trying to say who she really was, underneath the tabloid headlines. Her father, Skip Panettiere, a retired New York City Fire Department captain, released a statement calling her an incredible light and a force of nature who brought immeasurable love and joy to everyone who knew her and to the millions who watched her on screen. He asked, simply, for privacy while the family processes the loss. Her ex-fiancé, Vladimir Klitschko, with whom she shares her daughter, Kaya, posted an emotional tribute saying she had left this world far too soon. Outside Judson Mill Lofts in Greenville, flowers began appearing at the front entrance within a day of the news breaking. Local residents told reporters they'd learned what happened through social media, scrolling through their phones like everyone else, stunned that it had happened in their own town. And in the entertainment industry more broadly, tributes poured in from former castmates on Heroes and Nashville, describing a colleague who, despite everything the public knew about her struggles, showed up, worked hard, and treated people on set with warmth. None of that undoes what the public record shows about the 6 years before her death. But it's worth remembering, in the middle of a true crime investigation, that we're talking about somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, somebody's colleague. Not just a headline every time we cover a case on this channel. We like to show you what the public is actually asking, because it tells you where the real gaps in reporting are, and it tells us what to dig into next. In the days since Hayden Panettiere's death, search interest has clustered around a handful of very specific questions. Here's what people are actually typing in. Hayden Panettiere cause of death, still officially undetermined, pending toxicology. Was Brian Hickerson charged? As we've covered, no, not as of this recording. Hayden Panettiere autopsy results. The coroner's office has said there was no trauma found. Full toxicology has not yet been released publicly. Brian Hickerson Narcan, reflecting the unresolved question of who administered it and when. Hayden Panettiere Brian Hickerson timeline. People trying to piece together, hour by hour, exactly what happened that Sunday, which is a big part of why we built this episode the way we did. Hayden Panettiere expunged denied. The August 13th ruling, which keeps surfacing as one of the most searched single facts in this entire case, precisely because of how close it fell to her death. Lesley Vogel New York Times interview. Since this weekend, search interest in Hayden's mother has spiked sharply, driven almost entirely by the pawned items allegations. Hayden Panettiere memoir, This Is Me. People going back to her own words, in her own book, to try to understand the relationship from her perspective before anyone else's. And, somewhat quietly but consistently, Hayden Panettiere daughter Kaya, viewers wanting to know how her 9-year-old daughter is doing and who is caring for her. Klitschko has primary custody and has raised Kaya largely in Europe. Beyond his public tribute, the family has not shared further details, and out of respect for a child who has just lost her mother, we're not going to speculate further on that here. If you're searching any of these terms yourself right now, comment below and tell us. We read every comment, and it genuinely shapes what we dig into for the follow-up episode. We want to close the investigative portion of this episode by stepping back from Brian Hickerson specifically, because this case sits inside a much bigger, much older pattern, one that has nothing to do with fame. The Centers for Disease Control estimate that more than 1 in 3 women in the United States experience contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Survivors leave and return to abusive relationships, on average, multiple times before leaving for good. Not because they're weak, but because leaving an abuser is statistically one of the most dangerous moments in the entire relationship, and because the emotional architecture of coercive control is built, deliberately, to make leaving feel impossible. Hayden Panettiere did what advocates spend their careers begging survivors to do. She called the police. She got a restraining order. She testified. She let the case go to court. She wrote a best-selling memoir naming exactly what had happened to her, specifically so other people would recognize the warning signs in their own lives. And 6 years later, 3 days after a judge refused to erase the record of what he did to her, she was gone. We are not saying Brian Hickerson caused her death. As of this recording, no evidence made public supports that conclusion, and he has not been charged with anything related to it. What we are saying is that a documented abuser remained in her life, that the systems meant to protect her, the courts, the restraining orders, the felony convictions, did not, in the end, keep them apart. And that is worth sitting with regardless of how the death investigation concludes. Here's what to actually watch for as this story develops, because these are the concrete developments that would change everything we've told you tonight. 1. Toxicology results. Once released, they will tell us what was actually in Hayden Panettiere's system when she died, and they'll be the single biggest factor in determining manner of death. 2. Whether the Greenville Police Department or the DEA name anyone as a person of interest. As of now, no one has been. 3. Whether Brian Hickerson gives a personal, on-the-record statement, rather than the single legal statement issued through his attorney. 4. Whether Lesley Vogel's allegations about pawned items in the storage unit lead to any kind of formal complaint, civil or criminal. Right now, they exist only in the pages of one newspaper interview. We will be back with a follow-up the moment any of that changes. That's not a tease. That's a promise, because this channel does not disappear the second a case stops trending. Hayden Panettiere spent her career playing a girl who couldn't be hurt. In real life, she was hurt, repeatedly, by someone the justice system convicted. And then she survived it long enough to write the book, tell her story, and try to help somebody else get out before it was too late. What happened in that Greenville apartment on August 16th is still, legally, an open question. We've told you tonight exactly what's confirmed, exactly what's alleged, and exactly who said what. That's the job. We're not going to hand you a verdict this channel has no authority to give. If this episode helped you actually understand the timeline instead of just the headlines, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we will be the first channel to bring you the toxicology results the moment they're public. Drop your questions in the comments. Tell us what part of this case you want us to dig into next, the financial allegations, the 2019 and 2020 police reports in full, or the DEA's role. We read everything, and the most requested angle becomes our next deep dive. And if you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. You are not alone, and you deserve to be believed the first time you say something is wrong. I'm host Name. This has been True Crime Nabuma. We'll see you in the next one.